Welcome to Podcast 360, powered by the Podcast Academy. In 3 questions answered in 60 seconds each, you'll experience a 360-degree view of podcasting from a lineup of industry experts. The hosts of your favorite podcasts will take turns interviewing each other, creating a chain of podcast knowledge and perspective. There we go. Let's meet our industry experts. Today's host is...
Hi, everyone. I'm Veronica Belmont, host of Sword and Laser, with previous guest host Tom Merritt. I'm also Director of Product at Electronic Arts, working on user-generated content initiatives. You heard me last week when I was interviewed by Tom Merritt, host of Daily Tech News Show.
And who is our guest this week?
Hello, I'm Scott Johnson, and I am the founder of the Frog Pants Network, various shows like The Instance, The Morning Stream, Core, and Film Sack, all of which can be found at frogpants.com.
First, the game before the game. We ask our guests to share 2 truths and a lie. Our hosts will guess which is the lie, and we'll find out the answer together at the end of our conversation. Let's play Podcast 360.
All right, Scott, thank you so much for joining me on Podcast 360. I selfishly chose you for this interview because I miss you and I haven't talked to you in a long time. So yeah. I'm just so happy you're here.
Me too. It's been too long. I mean, I feel like we don't have as many excuses to hang out and talk anymore. So when I heard it was you, I got all stoked and I said, well, of course I want to do this. Sounds like fun.
This is going to be great. Of course, every episode of Podcast 360 kicks off with a round of 2 truths and a lie. Scott, are you ready to lay down your facts? And remember, you have to hold the correct answer until the end of this conversation, when you will eventually reveal the lie and we will learn what a dirty, dirty little liar you are.
Well, yes. And I also love this game, so I'm excited to do it. And I will try not to give anything away as I now tell you my 2 truths and a lie. Okay. I'll start with this one. I was asked by the electronic band Knife Party to provide voice samples for their hit track, Destroy Them with Lasers, back in 2011 or so. All right? That may be true. That may be a lie. You're going to have to decide for yourself. Number 2, I have the only gaming podcast to ever be played on the International Space Station. Confirmed.
Okay.
All right. And finally, some of my illustration work was snuck into scenes from the Avengers, the first one anyway, and the second National Treasure movie by fans who work in film special effects.
Oh, wow. Okay, this is really hard. These feel all very probable. And also, I feel like a deep-seated guilt for not just automatically knowing these, because I'm sure you've talked about them, like whichever ones are true on your shows endlessly or just in the community. And it just makes me feel how much I've stepped back from this podcasting world. So it makes me a little sad, but also this is really cool.
Yeah, and I also picked these based on which one of these would she be familiar with? Because some of these have happened since you kind of stepped away a little bit or were less active in our community. And as a result, I'm like, well, she's going to probably fall for this or fall for that. So these questions were specifically designed, or these answers were specifically designed to hopefully mess with you a little bit. So we'll see.
Oh, what makes me feel good though is I did get Tom last week. Like, he did not guess my answer. So I feel like he's known me for 20 plus years. Also, I still record with him every week and he still didn't know. So that helps out a little bit.
Oh, good. I'm actually happy to hear that. Good job.
Good. All right. So for an early guess, the lie, I'm going to say the International Space Station. I'm going to say that is not true. I really have no basis for that guess. It's a totally wild guess. I just feel like the voice samples, you have a great voice for songs. It's really specific. Destroy Them with Lasers feels like a really good thing that you would be on. I'm not familiar with the track myself, though. And your illustration work, although I feel like I would know if you were in scenes from the Avengers, because I've seen both of these movies, but you also have so many fans in the special effects world and in the film and television world that feels really plausible. All right, anyway, we'll come back to it. Let's first jump into the 360. So now I'm going to ask you 3 questions related to podcasting, and you'll have about 60 seconds to answer each. Once we get through your rapid round of answers, we can pick one of the subjects to kind of elaborate on a little bit more, get into some greater detail. Are you feeling ready?
Yeah, I've never felt more ready, to be honest.
Okay. So question number 1, and this is kind of silly, but I realized I don't actually know how you ever got into podcasting in the first place. So what attracted you to the format? How did you get started?
Well, it goes way back, and I won't tell this whole story, but way, way, way back in the day, when I was about 11 years old, I knew I wanted to draw and record things for a living. I didn't care how I got there. It was just a matter of when and how, and podcasting provided a way to do that. But I was actually doing this stuff as little small MP3s posted to a website as early as 98, 99, as soon as MP3s became a format. And it was really just a matter of time until something like podcasting would come around, give us some standards to work with so that we could actually make a go of it. But the minute that happened in 2004, I was like, well, yeah, of course we're doing this. We're doing this like right this second. I'm not going to waste any time. And so I did. And I'm happy to say to my, if I could go back in time, I'd probably freak him out pretty bad. But I'd love to go to my 11-year-old self and go, guess what? You're doing those two things that you love to do, and you're doing them for a living. Can you believe it? And then he would run and tell an adult that he had a stranger danger moment.
Strange man is talking to me about my future self.
Yep.
Awesome. Amazing. You have done some of the biggest interview formats, I think, in our industry. You've been on stage at BlizzCon. You've been at major events all over the country. What is the most difficult interview you've ever conducted, and why, if you can get into that?
Oh, that's a great question. I think the most difficult one was probably here recently. I did an interview with Chris Metzen at Blizzard Entertainment, who came back after a hiatus, about 8-year hiatus, to come lead World of Warcraft again. And they flew me out there to talk to him. He requested me, partly because I'd done this stuff for Blizzard before, but also he and I are close friends, and he felt like it would be a good thing. Well, the reason it was so hard isn't because it was Chris or isn't because it was Blizzard, because I did it in front of 26,000 people before.
26,000.
But what's weird is 26,000 people felt like no one, because it's so many people that it's basically nobody. It's just a giant room, a loud room, but really it's not individuals. I don't think of it that way. I think of it as just a sea of faces and people. When I sat down with Chris one-on-one a couple of weeks ago, and we had 5 production guys in the room, that was intense. So that's the reason. I like big groups. Small groups make me very nervous.
The intimacy, perhaps, of just like all those people close in. And one of the things I was laughing at when we started this episode was when you do your introduction, you have like at least 5-6 shows. And I feel like that's not even all of them. Scott, how many shows is too many shows?
Well, the most I've done at one point is 9. I think right now we're somewhere in the 7 range. I will argue that that's too many there. Like I do it because I'm obsessed with the format. I love doing it. I love exploring different stuff. All the shows have a very different focus. And I feel like I can't do everything in one place. So maybe it's undiagnosed ADHD or something, or who knows what it is that drives me to do it. But I'm like, well, I can, so I will. And it even gets worse when someone says you can't, or they say, well, you shouldn't, or that's too many. So somebody said 7's enough, Scott, don't do an 8th. That actually motivates me to figure out how to fit in an 8th. I don't think that's that healthy either, but I love the format so much. I love talking. I love building community. So for me, I don't know if there's really an upper limit, but I'm going to say 7 is about where you'd want to stop. And most people, maybe 3, 4.
Yeah, I feel like you and Tom are of a different breed, I would say, in terms of just being able to prep for and have that many shows and be able to keep them all feeling very fresh and their own thing. And that's a great skill to have.
Podcast 360 will be back in just a moment. And we're back with Podcast 360.
All right, so one last thing before we find out your truths and a lie. Are there any of those topics you want to dig into a little bit more? I actually know which one I'd like to hear more about, but that's just me. But this is your chance to talk.
What is your most what do you think is most interesting there?
I want to learn more about your conversation with Chris and about coming back into World of Warcraft. I mean, we had a guild together for a super long time. Yeah. What was it like talking to him after so long of him being out of the WoW space? Out
of the loop. Yeah, it was really interesting. And it's up there, on the internet for people to grab. So I recommend they check it out because I think Chris really has sort of a magical stage way about him. But here's something a lot of people don't know about him, although he's fairly open about it. He doesn't like this part of the job. He doesn't like the stage stuff, even though the sense of him on stage is like a rock star almost. It's like, wow, this guy. And in a way, he's one of the only people that comes to mind when you think of devs, designers, writers that work for video game companies who have this kind of presence. Is very charismatic and really drives people to be interested in what he's saying. But he doesn't like it, generally speaking. So when he reached out to me and said, hey, I don't want to do this interview unless you come do it, I said, well, of course I'll do it. And we've been friends long enough that was not an issue. But coming out there and then having that spotlight of a very specific lighting situation in a very small studio room with 5 people in the room looking at us at all time, checking sound, doing video, doing all of that. And then the other room just next to us, a bunch of PR people watching us and listening for anything we're not supposed to say. You know how that goes. Yeah. It was all very intense. But what's interesting about it is it was mostly intense in the lead up. Once he and I became conversational, which was the whole point of this. We didn't want it to be too scripted. It all came together and it was fine. We have a kind of a great bond that way. But what's interesting about that interview is you get to both see his creative spirit and also sort of the knowing the person behind the creativity really adds to that perspective. I think a lot of people see him and on the surface, they're just like the father of Warcraft. It doesn't get any bigger than this and that sort of thing. And in my circles, it's a huge deal. But knowing him personally, it's easier for me to go, yeah, I understand what motivates him, what's hard for him, what's easy for him. I know his family life. I know all these things that really add to it. So that experience is extremely fulfilling once I got past the small room, small group. It's a lot like being a teacher, I think. And if you had 50 students, it's fine. 50 students you can deal with. You have 2 students. Suddenly it's very intense and focused. And I think that's the kind of the feeling we were having there. So we were both kind of sweating bullets a little bit. And neither of us were sort of used to that format. And I couldn't believe I was actually saying in my head, man, I wish this was a room of 30,000 faces I don't know.
You're like that would have been easier. No problem.
Yeah.
Well, crazy. I think it's a testament to, I think, your personality and your skills as an interviewer and a podcaster, because I think you've always done a really good job at having that conversational style with people and making them feel really comfortable. And I think that's one of the reasons why you and your shows are so popular, is because you're like the big brother of podcasting. Like, I've always thought of you that way. And, it's just, you've built that community with that kind of intention and feeling. And I think that's one of the reasons why your community has been so successful.
It's a nice thing about Tom Merritt. You were talking about, you interviewed him last time. He once said, pretty famously, I think a lot of people know, or at least attributes to him, but he said, you get the chat room you deserve. And I used to think, well, I don't know quite what that means, but I think over time I've learned that if you are just who you are and you bring authenticity to the table and you don't try to fake it, and have sort of a different personality off air, you're kind of who you are on air or off air, you gather the kind of community and the kind of interest that is positive and good and will take you places. You can work a negative and maybe get more hits, but I don't think it's worth it in the end. And I don't know if there's a lesson I've learned over all that time, it's maybe slow and steady wins the race. And, you can attract a lot more good people around you if you're providing good content, not trying to manipulate them and that sort of thing. I think that's why you and I have always been friends. I think you work the same way. And that brother-sister thing is funny because you've always kind of been that, not to get mushy, but you've always kind of been like, hey, it's my little sister Veronica doing cool stuff over there. And I've missed our sibling sort of thing that we used to have going.
Oh, well, all right. We'll have to promise to stay better connected. It's like when you see people online, you just stuff that's going on in their lives. You're not talking directly, but you still feel connected. But we should make more of a
Yeah, there are people in my life I talk to every day or even once a week. And I feel like they're always around, but I haven't physically seen them in like 5-6 years. So
it's bizarre.
It's weird.
What a weird world we live in.
Yeah.
Well, there is one last thing we have to do now. I have to pick which of those things I actually think were a lie. Oh, I need like a final answer now. Okay. Do I know if you have any contacts at the ISS? That is a tricky one. All right. I'm going to stick with my original answer. I'm going to say that you have not been played in the International Space Station. What say you, Scott Johnson?
I'm sad to say, or to inform you, that I'm a terrible liar and you are correct.
Yeah!
That is the ISS. 100% correct. That was one, I felt like it seemed a little plausible because the other two seemed a little crazy too. And it's even, for those at home are going like, well, where are you in the Avengers? Where are you in National Treasure 2? It's a blink and miss it kind of thing. I used to have timestamps, although one of them got moved around, so I'm not sure where it is now, but there is, that one is true. And the Destroy Them with Lasers song is available wherever you stream music, so you can hear my dumb VO in that anytime you want. I wish somebody had told me about the International Space Station thing, but absolutely a lie.
They're stuck up there now, so there's still a chance it could happen.
That's true. That's true. We could make it happen between now and the next time the show airs. So
They're probably running out of stuff to do. So it's not to say that they wouldn't enjoy listening to your show, but
of course
maybe
not.
More opportunities to seed them with content.
Sure.
Well, thank you, Scott, so much for sharing about yourself and your shows. As always, a pleasure to talk to you. Can you tell people where they can find all of your work?
Yeah, it's one central place, super simple and easy. Of course, you can find all my podcasts anywhere you get podcasts, but if you were looking for kind of the root source, you can find it all at frogpants.com. There's an entire section for podcasts. I also have a bunch of artwork stuff I do there. My work is about 50-50 in that regard, and you might find something you like. So if you are interested in anything we said today or just want want to check out what I've got going on, that is frogpants.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thanks, of course, to the Podcast 360 team and everyone out there listening.
Thank you for listening to Podcast 360, where you experience a 360-degree view of podcasting. Special thanks to the Podcast Academy and DCP Entertainment. Follow us on social media at The Ambies and at DCP Official on Instagram. And subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so that you never miss an episode.